My name is Reyna. This is my presentation on Gestalt theory as it relates to group counseling. So, part one, understanding Gestalt theory. So Gestalt is a German term. It's used to define a unique patterning in which the parts are integrated into a perceptual whole. So what that basically means is that there are different aspects to the self, different ways that we interact in the world. And by aligning those ways in a way that contributes to our holistic self, that's how we become whole. So part of that is through awareness of the here and now, and that is essential to self-regulation. So it's originally developed as a socially progressive, holistic alternative to conservative trends in psychoanalysis. So this was created in opposition to that. And it consists of a couple different pillars. So one of them is phenomenology. So that's examining conscious awareness of one's experience, life story, environmental factors, and self. So basically, we all have our own subjective experience of life and how we live our lives, and each of those experiences are valid. And in the group setting, by sharing those experiences, that we can come to see eye to eye with each other, and contributes to the complexity and the openness of the group. And that is how members of the group are able to bond with each other by understanding, yes, I experienced life in this way, you experience life in that way, and both of these are valid. Our experiences are our subjective experiences, and phenomenology is the way that we try to put ourselves in their shoes and understand their experiences, and also have our experiences be understood too. Existentialism. So it's basically, understanding human existence as it relates to purpose and meaning. It's those big questions in life. Who am I? Why am I? A big part of Gestalt theory has to do with Zen Buddhism. A lot of it is based in that. And part of Zen Buddhism is accepting what is, not trying to change the things that you can't change, but accepting what is, and then what can you do moving forward with that. Field theory is another pillar of Gestalt theory. So that places the individual within their environment and social context. So individuals are basically just responding to their environment, things they experience and the things around them, whether that's a good adaptation or a bad adaptation. So conversely, when an individual self-actualizes, they will likely enhance and enrich their society. So we really want more people, as many people as possible, to self-actualize. Because by doing so, we're able to build a better world and contribute to the growth and self-actualization of others. So the field and the individual depend on one another for their environment. We can only move forward as long as people are moving forward within themselves, and people are only moving forward within themselves if their environment is contributing to that too. Dialogue. This is very important. A big part of Gestalt theory is the relationship between client and counselor, but also client and client, especially in the group setting. So dialogue is just that simple process of facilitating rapport and relationship building. It's rooted in kind of this empathic understanding, and that's what forms a genuine trusting relationship, and that's ultimately what's the most helpful in using Gestalt theory in a group setting. I thou. So other people's experiences are as real and valid as our own. And it's important to be with others and be in their experiences with them. It's a way to kind of be inclusive, egalitarian, value diversity and dignity of group members' experiences. This is just like the process of validating people's experiences. There's also this idea of the paradoxical theory of change. So when individuals give up trying to become what they would like to become, that's when change happens. When they stop struggling to change and stop trying to change and just accept who they are and how things are, that's when change can start to happen. So it's kind of this idea of trying to stop yourself from swimming upstream. You kind of have to go with it and accept that this is where you are now, and that's where change can start to happen once you accept what is. And some of the techniques that Gestalt theory uses, there's a list of them there. You might be familiar with some of them. I'll go through a couple of them, just, we have some kind of idea. A location of feelings. So this is where you have the client identify within their body where a particular feeling is. Empty chair, when you have, I'm sure you've seen this before at some point. You sit the client on one side and have them have a conversation with, have them have a dialogue with someone in an empty chair. And then flip those roles and have that person that they're trying to talk to respond to them. Making the rounds, that's where you have an individual client solicit feedback from the group, or have that client make statements for each individual person in that group. So literally making the rounds, person to person to person, getting feedback or giving feedback. Things like, can you stay with this feeling if someone is expressing a complicated feeling or something that's impactful for them? Ask the client to stay in that space and explore that feeling and understand what that feeling is ultimately rooted in. Because again, self-awareness is the most important thing, among the most important things of Gestalt theory. Self-awareness is where everything is rooted in. And so by doing things like, can you stay with this feeling? It helps the client become a little more self-aware. Exposing the obvious, things like if you notice a client is fidgeting, calling that out and say, I noticed that you're fidgeting. Yeah, and so those are some of the techniques. There's way more I could have thrown in, but that's not the only thing that this presentation is about. So again, also cycle of awareness. Like I said, awareness is one of the most important things in Gestalt theory. And so we start over here in the bottom left, organism at rest. Our job as counselors is to help guide the client through this cycle. And we, using Gestalt theory, need to try to understand where the client is at in that particular cycle, and how to get them moved to the next step of the cycle. And so that, that's one of your roles. And among your roles as a group leader, stay in awareness of your own phenomenology and that of the group. This is where a lot of transference can happen and counter-transference. So, again, be mindful of that. Be mindful of and adaptable to the here and now experience. A lot of Gestalt theory is really focused on in the moment, here and now. What are you feeling right now, and where is that coming from? And so being mindful of that is very important. Being with the client instead of explaining, changing, or otherwise therapizing the client's experience. As a group leader, using Gestalt theory, it's not necessarily the opportunity to deep dive into their history. It's really more about just the phenomenological experience, listening to what their experience is and understanding the emotions surrounding that experience, being there with the client. Avoid interrupting the group's experiences according to pre-existing template. It's probably something that we're going to do one time or another as overeager new counselors, but we really have to let the group kind of experience what the group needs to experience. Continue doing your own growth work. I mean, that should be a given in any of the theories that we go over, really. But Gestalt theory really hammers in, like, you are a part of this too, and continue doing your own growth work outside of this group. And creating a group culture that gives permission, support, and validation to members' various responses to the leader. You set the tone as a leader. Multiculturalism and diversity. So One of the main goals of Gestalt theory is developing self-awareness as well as social awareness, which is, the next step out of self-awareness. Once we understand ourselves, how can we use that knowledge to understand others? And so Goodman identifies 4 principles that aim to promote social awareness. And these are seeking a sense of community and connectedness. We want to experience an environment that supports us relating to others and understanding our feelings and connecting to people. We seek human contact and dialogue among equals. Seeing eye to eye is super important as you're using Gestalt theory in a group setting. Get everyone on the same page, on eye to eye. In the psychology of self-social unity, the individual's experience of acting on their emotions will tend to enhance the well-being of society. So like what we were saying earlier, once you start becoming self-aware and you start using that knowledge to enhance your environment, that's where that growth needs to kind of spread. You enrich your environment, and then in turn your environment enriches you. So that's a huge part of understanding and appreciating diversity. And number 4, we seek to support group members' differentiated responses to the field, their emotional response, subjectivity, autonomy, and agency in relation to their social surroundings. So again, big way to understand diversity and experiences outside of your own, which is exactly what Gestalt theory is about. So some of the strengths of Gestalt theory. There's an emphasis on clients' inherent wholeness and capacity for self-awareness. That's very strong. It's effective for treating mood, anxiety, somatoform, personality, and adjustment disorders, as well as occupational and interpersonal conflicts. You can apply it to really a lot of different situations. It works best for overly socialized, restrained, and constricted individuals who intellectualize and have trouble clarifying their feelings. So you can use this with any age, but you're likely going to find it to be more effective as people become a little more self-aware and have the capacity for self-awareness. So some weaknesses. It does emphasize individual responsibility for one's own happiness and advocates for the expression of emotion, which might be incompatible with some collectivist cultures. We're more than likely going to be practicing counseling in the US. And we're going to have people who come from not the US and are in these collectivist cultures. And if we're expecting them to be comfortable right away with expression of emotion, you'll probably not get a lot of buy-in. So it takes a little more nuance to navigate that. Novice counselors may over-rely on techniques and experiments without sufficient training, which may end up harming the client. So if you are over-eager, again, to use the empty chair technique, and that brings up some really strong emotions for the client, you've got to deal with those emotions, and you got to be ready to deal with those really strong emotions. So you might have the technique down, but it's even more important to have down how to navigate those complicated emotions after you're done with the experiment. So it really is a matter of not getting too ahead of yourself with wanting to use some of these techniques. It doesn't lend itself well to DSM-5 diagnosis, which limits applicability in managed care settings. There's really this, from what I could tell in Gestalt theory, this kind of go with it mentality, and it kind of lives in a lot of gray areas, and that doesn't really work well with DSM-5. Okay, so applying Gestalt theory. So in regards to the story with Joe, from reading it, it sounds like, and applying Gestalt theory to it, it sounds like Joe has a lack of self-awareness, and that's what's affecting his ability to self-regulate. So there's a thing called impasse, where clients get stuck and doubt their ability to be self-supporting. Maybe they've relied too heavily on external support in the past. It's no longer available. So now they're in this new situation, and they're stuck. They're stuck. And so part of our job would be to direct Joe to increase his self-awareness, which will serve to improve his relationships with others. And when it comes to Anna and Kyle, this is an opportunity to enhance the counseling relationship with them. Because Gestalt theory would say, don't avoid this complicated emotion, this complex event, this experience. Don't avoid it. Rather than seeking resolution of conflicts, we seek the development of a self held in the safety of the group, which can work with the issues and conflicts that arise. So working with the issues, not running away from them. Because running away from them, avoiding these emotions does not contribute to growth. So some methods like say it again and rehearsal would be effective methods to employ. Now, say it again is a method where, let's say Joe starts saying something along the line of something disparaging to someone. Say it again would put the spotlight on Joe and have him say it again, and have him repeat until he's able to hear exactly what he's saying and try to help him understand the impact of what he's saying. And so that would go to increase his awareness, right? His self-awareness. And rehearsal would be another technique to encourage him to use. And rehearsal is basically stopping yourself before you say the thing that you're about to say and rehearsing it in your head and trying to imagine how it might come out and how it might affect people and what you could say instead, and practicing that. So catching yourself before it comes out and trying to rehearse it and see if that is how you want to proceed. And if there's a better way, then that's the time to explore that. So encouraging him to use rehearsal would be a technique that I would encourage with Joe in this scenario. Now, addiction treatment. So the example I want to use for how Gestalt applies to addiction is with sex addiction or emotional addiction, anything along those lines. So a good thing that would, something that would be beneficial for running a group on sex addiction would be reducing shame. Because once you reduce shame, you start to break down the barriers with people and you start encouraging openness and the opportunity to build healthier relationships. So for example, chronic deprivation of needs, right? Which is a lot of times at the root of sex addiction. Has created a situation where the client interacts in relationships with a distorted view. So making the rounds could be a useful tool. So in making the rounds, the client is asked to engage each member of the group, for example, by soliciting feedback or making a statement. And by sharing that material that under normal circumstances would bring increased shame, it might actually bring a sense of relief and a sense of closeness to the other group members because, they're all there for sex addiction too. So being able to talk about it and being able to address it directly and openly, that is going to be what helps create growth in the individual and in the group. So again, tying it back to the main goals of increasing awareness and encouraging healthier connections and relationships. Now with the grief and loss group, it might be helpful to employ something like retroreflection. So this is where the client determines which aspects of the self have been projected onto others and subsequently bring them back to the self. So if someone, feels anger for how they were, for example, treated by a parent that they've lost, right? Using retroreflection, they would be able to sort of split themselves in two and address, that anger that they feel. Instead of it being outward, they bring it inward and try to understand where this anger is actually rooted in. So this creates a new way of relating and creating contact. One of the guiding principles in Zen Buddhism as it relates to Gestalt theory too, suffering is found in our relationship to experience and not in an experience or an event itself. So we suffer not because of an event or because something happens. We suffer because of our relationship to that event. So by looking at our relationship to that event and by examining the direction that we experience emotions in terms of relating to that event, we can start to grow again, greater self-awareness and greater self-regulation, which are the ultimate goals of Gestalt therapy. So here are my references. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to hearing your response.